Hello, Christ is
Yes.
risen.
Truly, he is risen. In sooth, verily,
Forsooth,
verily, the Lord riseth from the grave.
upon the day that is third in the numbering, five shall be right out.
Yes. So there were a couple moments, I got to admit my impiety here, that when some of the readings occur on like Holy Saturday, and there's the and whenever you hear the sound of bagpipe and lute and lyre and organs and da 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 da, you must bow down and worship the statue, and like all of that kind of stuff, like the reading for the three holy ewes. And every time it says and whenever there's the sound of pipes and bagpipes and lyres and organs and cymbals and da 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 da, every time that happened, and it happens like 3 or 4 times that they list all of the instruments that are going to play.
Yes.
I just started laughing because it for sure reminded me of Monty Python when he's like, and thou shalt have the orangutans and chimpanzees and breakfast cereals, and it's just like this long list. And like, get to the point, brother. But skip
Which
ahead.
they repeat again and again and again.
Yes, it's so good.
I love that. It's true. It's definitely, you read some of those books and it's like they needed an editor. Just say instruments. Red pen.
Yes.
Instruments.
Yeah. All the instruments.
Yes. Yeah, and you don't need to repeat all the instruments every time.
I think you could have just said like plethora, like a plethora of instruments.
Yes, a cornucopia of instruments. A grab bag of instruments.
Mm-hmm. Do you know what it means to have a plethora, Steve?
A plethora?
Now, El Guapo, I'm not the man of your superior intellect and education. But could it be that once again you are mad about something and looking to take it out on me?
There's a film we can do at some point.
Oh my gosh, that's one of my favorites of all time. I would just not like to think that someone would tell a man he has a plethora of piñatas and come to find that that man has no idea what it means to have a plethora.
I love it. And I also love that everybody in the chat right now and all those who are listening when it is recorded are just like, delete out. Who are these people and why are they talking about things that are not related to the thing they say they're going to talk about?
Exactly.
Unsubscribe. How's it going? What are you drinking there? Is that kombucha?
It is kombucha. It is a Trader Joe exclusive strawberry limonada.
Ah.
It's delicioso. Have you ever had it?
I have. I enjoyed
strawberry
it.
lemonade?
I have. I like it.
Making me very happy.
I do also like their cayenne. They have that spicy one. Have you tried their like cayenne lemonade? I like that one. It's weird.
It is. It bites you back.
Which is a weird thing for a liquid to do, formless as it is.
Especially because you don't even bite liquid in the first place.
Unless you freeze it.
Then it's a solid.
I do try it. Oh, yeah, you're right. Dang it. I can try biting my coffee. Science rules.
This kombucha is really chewy. If your kombucha is chewy, it's old. It's bad. Take it back.
I have a bottle of apple cider vinegar here. Should I show it? It's kind of gross. I'll show it.
Oh Lord, I'm scared.
So it's Brad's organic, right? It's like good stuff. And it was towards the end, and I was cooking a recipe that needed a little bit of vinegar. And as you can see, it is more mother than vinegar at this point. It's just like a jellyfish caught in the bottom of my vinegar.
I don't like it. I don't like that at all.
Yeah, this is not pourable vinegar. This is now with the mother and only the mother. Anyway, what's going on? How are you doing?
I'm doing all right. How are you doing?
I'm well. It's good to be back.
It's funny because we do this follow up every week now, and it's like where I'm standing from. I don't know about you, but generally speaking, not much to report. Business as usual. I don't know.
Same verse as the last time.
Yep. Still
Yeah.
spent 12 hours in my home office yesterday.
That's true. That's
You
true.
know?
This we're still doing this every week, which is a lot of fun. We Are Orthodoxy still happening. Wandering the Desert still happening. Be the Bee still happening. All the stuff at y2am.org/at-home. Still working on a pan-Orthodox level with people who are doing lots of really great live streams and podcasts and stuff to help people. Still doing the small group stuff with which more parishes are getting on board with, which is super cool. Just lots of stuff. Same stuff.
When you said pan-Orthodox, it made me very hungry for pan pizza.
Now for a personal pan-Orthodox.
Now for a personal hand-tossed Orthodox. This Orthodox is thin and crispy.
This Orthodox has smaller Orthodoxes in the crust.
Oh, man. Stuffed Orthodox crust?
Yes.
That sounds delicious.
Except each of
now
these
with
Orthodoxes
50% more stuffed Orthodox
have chocolate in their crust.
Oh, that is like, this is like a crustception.
That is Pawnee level. There's one thing at where Leslie Knope talks about this one restaurant that does like a personal pan pizza with smaller pan pizzas in the crust, and each of those pan pizzas have chocolate in their crusts. Speaking of Parks and Rec, this is totally not our follow-up, but I think we're both excited about this. Tomorrow, in real time, Parks and Rec is coming back for a day.
That'll be very interesting to see what happens.
Yes.
Because they all filmed it from their own homes.
They did. I'm very excited to see that. I'd imagine we're going to cover this on follow-up next week.
I can have more Parks and Rec.
Totally.
Totally.
Before we get into it, because I think, these are weird times, right? We've been getting into the habit of talking about things that we are grateful for. But before we get into sort of our normal stuff, what are you grateful for on this beautiful Wednesday?
On this beautiful Wednesday of April 29th, 2020, my sweet Amelia is turning 1 year old today.
Yay!
Today the day of her birth. And she's adorable. And she is awesome, and she's the happiest little baby, and it's just been such a joy to have her as part of our family. Do you want to see a picture of her from this morning?
I would love to see a picture of her.
Picture of her this morning.
I haven't seen her since January. Is she eating birthday cake?
She's eating birthday peas.
She's eating birthday peas.
The peas of the Lord, my peas that I give to you.
And with thy spirit.
She's so sweet.
I love her big crown that's bigger than her face.
She's just the happiest little girl. I wish I had another really nice one to show you here somewhere. She got a little water table. Her grandparents got her a little water table, and she's so happy with it.
That is so sweet.
I know. I'm so happy. She's the best. So today I'm grateful. I'm grateful for my little baby girl, whom I love.
Yes, she's great. She's great. She is.
I agree. She is wicked cute.
She is wicked cute. As Jenny says, she is wicked cute. Speaking of babies, my sister gave birth to another baby, and now I am an uncle that much more times over.
Is it a human baby?
It's a human baby. Yeah.
Yay!
Against all odds.
Yay, humans.
Against all odds, it's a human baby.
Humans.
Yeah, and she is sweet. She's named after my mom. She's super cute. I don't have my phone here. It's charging in the other room, but she is super adorable. Just cheeks. She's all cheeks.
Cheeks on cheeks. That's how they are when they come out. They have to like grow bodies and stuff. They come out and they're like just cheeks. Congratulations, Uncle Steve.
Thank you. That's Theo Steve to you.
Sorry, Teo. Teo Steve.
Teo Steve, yes. For the Erasmian pronunciation. Teo Steve.
Or as El Guapo would say, Dio Steve. Dio Esteban.
Yes.
Dio Estelios.
Oh, yes. Uncle Stelios.
Uncle Stel.
Oh, man. So many names. We lost everybody with the Three Amigos reference. Now we're totally losing everybody with this deep dive into etymologies. But what are we doing this week? It's the week after Bright Week. And there's a really cool thing that is out there that we're going to do. So why don't you introduce the people to what are we doing this week?
This week we are talking about New Men, a documentary that was just recently released from ancient faith. Yeah.
Yeah, which
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
super
Yeah.
excited about.
I
I'm
know.
super
Me
excited
too.
about.
So why don't you give us a little rundown um, about it?
Totally. So we are not going to need to invoke the spoiler porg because there is no sort of plot as such. We're not spoiling any plot or anything. It's a documentary, and it's a documentary. It's kind of a peek into the life at Holy Cross Monastery in West Virginia, which is it's a monastery under Rocor, I believe it is, kind of in the foothills of West Virginia. Not the West Virginia that John Denver sings about, because that's actually the western part of Virginia, but in the state West Virginia there is a Holy Cross Monastery, and it's about 45 minutes long. So it's not like a super long kind of like full feature documentary. It's really wonderful. And I guess if you kind of think about the plot or the drama such as it is, there's kind of two currents. It's kind of almost a year in the life of this monastery, the kind of the countdown to Pascha, which is the culmination of the liturgical life of the church, and it's also kind of the culmination of the life of this community. And also the week after Pascha, this particular year when it's filmed, they welcome a new father into their ranks. And there's Father Justin, who was a novice for a while, and he becomes kind of a full-fledged schema monk at the end of the documentary as well. So it's kind of like the community's role. What's that?
The monk Basil.
He takes the name Basil. That's right.
He's tonsured as Basil. Yeah.
That's right. That's right. So it's like the life of the community going forward to this feast day, and it's also the life of the community sort of getting ready to welcome him, with interviews of individual monks. Like 5 of the monks were interviewed, the abbot interviewed, and just sort of snippets of their life. So did I miss anything? That's basically it, right?
That's pretty much it. Yeah.
Yeah. It's available on Vimeo. And it's also like there's a website. I think it's like New Men Doc or something. We'll put it in the description when the podcast goes live, where you can find it. You can buy a DVD. I think you can rent it. There are definitely communities across the country that have done screenings of this in the past. Probably a communal screening. This is not the time for that, but you can watch it from the safety and security of your own home right now. As Christian and I did.
Why can't people watch it together? Why can't they get together and do it, Steve?
As long as they're 6 feet apart. Although no, I will not recommend people getting together at the moment. Watch it at home. But what did you think, Christian, of this documentary? What's your take?
Well, I thought it was absolutely beautiful. Just from start to finish, like I just cared. I cared about it. Like I felt like I was continually surprised by things. Like that might sound really silly to say, but like there were just moments when I was like, oh my gosh, like I did not anticipate having this moment in this documentary, or like whatever it might have been. So I really loved it, and would actually I really want to watch it again, just to make sure that like I didn't miss anything, because I loved seeing the monks. I loved seeing their monastery. Oh my gosh. Like,
yeah,
I wanted to go. I was like, not that I want to go join the monastery, but I'm like, I want to go live where that monastery is and live in the woods like that. That seems wonderful.
Yeah.
Sign me up.
It's not as hot as Phoenix. I very much
but now we
it.
can go swimming though. That's the thing though, about now that it's getting warmer over here, now we can go swimming, which is like so wonderful. Our pool feels so good right now. You should come over and try it.
I would love to. I would totally love to. I've been in your pool.
You have?
I have been in your pool. I was there for your daughter's baptism. We had a little pool party after the baptism.
And one of those baptismal briskets.
Yeah. Oh, that was good. Thought derailed. All thoughts turned to briskets.
So what do you think about these fasting monks?
I very much liked it as well. I thought it was beautiful to watch. The cinematography was excellent. The pacing of the film was so good. There was a lot of just kind of quiet in the film. There were sort of these short sort of bursts of narration and interviews, with a lot of just sort of the noise of birds and the noise of the buzzing bees and the noise of the chickens, and occasionally, individual monks kind of saying the prayer to themselves, the Jesus prayer, as they were working. So the pacing of it really kind of instilled this sense of like, I'm there. I'm not just listening to a lot of like chatter. I'm kind of like instilled somehow in the rhythms of this, the simandron, the sort of wood that they use to sort of knock in the middle of the night to rise people and call them to church. and for me, as somebody who has been to a bunch of monasteries over my life and kind of for a while thought that I wanted to end up at one myself, it really like reawakened this, like, this is why I love this particular kind of like vocation, and why I still enjoy visiting and going on pilgrimages for a weekend or a week every now and again. There's just something particularly beautiful about that. And it was cool because a lot of my buddies from seminary have visited there before. So it was kind of
Oh, wow.
cool. Yeah. I have friends of mine who were like clergy in the area that would go on retreats every now and again. And then friends from seminary who from all over the country would go there and have talked about how special a place is. So it was really cool to kind of see what they meant. So on kind of a very personal level, I got to see what my friends have experienced. So it was really cool. So I loved it. I thought it was great. Well worth watching, well worth watching if you can get your hands on it. And it's online, so it's really easy to watch. Really beautiful documentary.
Agreed. So I think one of the places that we'll start as I clear my throat into all of your ears is we talked about this before, but this idea of kind of like Orthodox art, right? Like art and orthodoxy and all of that kind of stuff. And we've had several conversations about this with different pieces that have been made by Orthodox artists or filmmakers or whatever.
Yeah.
And I think that it's worth mentioning that our conception often is this idea that if we take something and kind of put like an Orthodox icon sticker on it, that we think that it officially gets like the seal of approval as being like this Orthodox piece of glory, or something. And I don't think that is true, obviously, like that just because something has an icon on it, that it makes it good. But I thought that this thing in particular was actually one of those shining examples of a filmmaker who just made something beautiful, who just made something good. To that end, I kind of just really appreciated this documentary as I think a shining example of Orthodox art.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know, but you have anything to say about that?
Yeah. No, I mean, so this is, I don't think it's a dead horse because I think it's something that is worth repeating. We talk, I think this was actually one of our earliest episodes. I know now we're on episode 127, right? But if you're familiar with the podcast from the beginning, I think in episode like 1 or 2, right? Or maybe 1 or 2 or 3, I forget, very, very early, we covered kind of this, like what does Christian art look like? Why is so much Christian art lacking? Because there's a lot of art there that is kind of very conscious of itself and is more interested in kind of communicating a perspective rather than initiating people into an experience. And this is kind of like we talked about this dichotomy sometimes between art and propaganda, right? And I feel like sometimes Christian art, which comes across as propaganda, like it's got an agenda, it kind of wants to, it's trying to catechize you, or it's trying to sort of beat you over the head with something, and it's very unsubtle, and it's just, there's no consideration to sort of aesthetic qualities. There's no consideration to just sort of the gentle rhythms of art, which kind of like wash over you sometimes. It's kind of like the lapping of the waves in a pool. Sometimes it's gentle, sometimes it's like a tsunami that sort of comes over you if it's a really powerful piece of art. But like art operates on a level that kind of agenda doesn't. And this was that, right? This wasn't something that was there to like make sure that you walked away having a clear sense of like, this is what monasticism is and this is what they do, right? It's like it was inviting you to participate in a mode of life. It was inviting you to participate in the heart of this community and the heart of some of the human beings that were there. It was inviting you to just kind of like relish the silence and the rhythms and the beauty of the place. It was beautiful. It was beautiful, and it was artistically done. And not all Christian stuff like rises to that level. And I'm really glad for Sam. Sam is the filmmaker who made this piece. He reached out a couple of weeks ago, and he just kind of emailed and said, "Hey, like this, documentary is coming out. Just wanted to put it on your radar." And I'm glad that he did, because it's like Sam Cox. He filmed it. He directed it. He did a really amazing job with this. And I think this is like, it's like, I know like 5 minutes into this, I don't know how, like, I literally had this conversation kind of going in my head, like, wow, like the pacing of this, the cinematography of this, like this looks like something that I would find on, you know, Netflix or like a streaming service, right? Like this looks like good art.
Yeah.
And it filled me with this sense of like, you know, this is something that is inviting people into an experience they otherwise wouldn't get. It's like an Orthodox Christian monastery,
Yeah.
but it's well done and beautiful. Yeah. I have so much appreciation for Sam's work here.
Me too. The moments where, you know, that are kind of interwoven throughout there of like seeing the monks doing their work and just like hearing them say the Jesus prayer, right? Like as they go about stuff, like that they're just in the middle of, like, it was this kind of running thread throughout the whole thing that like I felt like really beautifully framed just the whole idea of what this, you said being invited into this mode of life, of like what that looks like, you know, and like you don't have to be a monk to do that. Like,
Yeah.
you know, I've got to mow the lawn later because, you know, we're having like family over for social distancing birthday party, and like we're all going to be outside in 105 degrees and it's going to be great. And because that's how you do birthdays in Phoenix in April under quarantine. This is what it is. So like I'm thinking like, okay, like that is an opportunity, instead of me being, you know, like out there going like, oh God, oh it's hot, like it becomes this chance to, you know, try to lean into this idea of like filling every moment with the presence of Christ, kind of in this, like you're saying, this like mode of life, right? Like entering into this way of being in the world and seeing the world.
Yeah.
And I think that what you're, you know, what you're saying is so true, that like one of the things I think that good art really does is it doesn't propagandize anything, right? It's not propaganda or like pushing an agenda of some kind. Otherwise it becomes really like, it just feels preachy. Like do you remember the show like Seventh Heaven? Like Seventh
Yes.
Heaven was one of
Yes.
those shows that just was like super preachy.
Yeah.
And Glee was equally preachy,
In the
but from
other
the
direction.
opposite moral compass. Yeah,
Yes.
exactly.
Yeah.
And so like both of those things end up becoming this like, this begins to feel like you're just trying to like sell me something, and it's a big commercial for like a particular kind of like, you know, way of being or whatever.
Totally.
That's it's not interesting, but good art I think does take something and just kind of shows you what it is in a way that you can like really see it, you know, that you can really digest it. But I think that what it also does is it kind of takes something maybe that you think, you know, and shows you the like either like the other side of it, or like an underbelly, or like something, it's just some part of it that, you know, you've overlooked because you've automated your response to a particular thing. Like my response to monasticism is totally automated, and I just kind of think that I understand what monks are about, even though like I've been to a monastery maybe like twice ever, you know. And I'm like, oh, I think I'm sure I know what that's about. I'm sure I know how they are. You know, like, and so we were going to watch this thing about monks, and I was like, I know how this is going to go. It's going to be fine. And then I was like, oh, this is not at all going how I thought that it was going to go. You know, in some moments, like in some moments, it totally absolutely was exactly what I expected. In others, it absolutely was not. You know, like when I just hearing the monks talk about like, you know, their former manners of life, and just even like, you know, some of the like that one who talked about like the weirdest moment was when he like just deleted all this music that he had collected.
Yeah, like when it got
You know?
real, what he was doing.
Yeah. And I was like, dude, like that is like, that's an element that you don't think about, right? To this whole thing. Like, sure, like leaving your job and like leaving your home and like all of that kind of stuff is like, yeah, that's what monks do. But like deleting their iTunes libraries, like that's the kind of thing that you're like, oh, that's part of that. That's weird, man. Like that's a really weird element that I never would have thought about. Like,
Yeah.
goodbye Fleet Foxes, goodbye Flogging Molly, goodbye Tenacious D.
That's an eclectic mix of music right there. but it's true, right? Like that is the, like on a real human level, like that's what that means for somebody to actually go all into this, right? Because like you're getting this window into people who are wholly committed to this way of life. Like they are all in as monks, and like the you know, the titles on screen, there's no overarching narration. Every now and again, like you'll get a title on screen that kind of explains what is happening. and they'll talk about, like, it'll say on screen, you know, when a person takes his kind of full monastic vows, he's renouncing the world completely. I mean, he's basically saying, I'm going to live in this monastery until the day I die.
Till death do us part.
Till death do us part. Yeah. You know, like, so that's I think where that word, the words vows comes in, right? There's kind of like this very kind of marital thing, like a man is kind of or a woman, if it's a, you know, a nun, joining herself to this community, to this place. But it's interesting, right? Because yeah, like if you think about it, like if you were to go, right, and leave to, you know, assuming you weren't married, you didn't have kids, whatever it is, like you'd have to turn off your electricity. You'd have to like do something with your laptop. You'd have to like sell your car, right? Like there's all these like little human things. And I wonder for me, right, what is the moment when I would sort of realize like, oh crap, I'm actually going all in. Like the thing that I'm very committed to, the thing that is kind of like wrapped up in my identity, like this one monk and his music, like I'm actually saying no to this, and this old life is ending. Like, I wonder what that would be for me. Like, what's the sort of like the click moment that like, oh, that chapter is closing. I'm deleting like all this music that I've spent like a lifetime developing. Like, I wonder about that.
It'd probably be like canceling your subscription to your Full Focus planner.
Dear Deacon Michael, I regret to inform you that though a satisfied customer, I will no longer have need of productivity because other monks are going to take care of these things for me. I'm going to go tend to the chickens.
Big 3, chickens. All right, check.
Chickens, matins, vespers, done.
5 o'clock, silence. 6 o'clock, silence. 7 o'clock, silence. 9 o'clock. Third hour.
9 p.m. to 9 a.m. Silence.
Yes, that would be the, and you just do that every day.
Yes. Yeah. Same verses before, right?
Yeah.
Same verses before.
That's a good question, man. I wonder what that would be for me too. Like, I mean, obviously, like there'd be a lot to leave behind. Like I probably couldn't ever do that right now. But like,
no, definitely not now. Yeah.
I'm just not a monk. Like that's the reality too.
Yeah.
I think I'm looking around and thinking like what would probably be, and I'm thinking it probably would be like, oh, like all my books. Like I've carried these books with me everywhere. You know, like I've had these books longer than anything else, I think, in my home. And like that would be really weird because like I remember even when I went to Luther Seminary, I took clothes and my books. I didn't like have a plan on getting a bed when I was there. I didn't plan on getting like any, because I was only gonna be there on campus for like 6 months. But I took literally all of my books in like these 2 huge boxes, you know, like just huge things. And it's like, probably didn't really need to do that. I didn't have a bookshelf or anything. I just like threw them on just like stacked them on the floor. And so I had these like stacks of books just all over my apartment.
And parting with that would be this kind of like nail in the coffin of the own life. Yeah. I feel like for me, it wouldn't even be the Full Focus planner. The more that I think about it, again, like I'm not going to a monastery or anything, but like if I was unattached and if that was the thing, I feel like doing the final episode of Be the Bee or kind of like some last like work thing, because that's where so much of my identity is wrapped up. That would be the thing where it's like, oh snap.
Didn't you already do a final episode of Be the Bee?
Twice.
Haven't we already done that?
Yeah, I just can't get enough.
Okay, guys, I swear this time it's for real.
I can quit anytime. I can quit anytime.
Promise. This is Star Wars Episode 9. This is the last trilogy. All right. It was always a plan to be a trilogy of trilogies. Okay, this is part 1 of the goodbye episode. Yes. I promise.
The goodbye
part
season.
2. Yeah. This is the goodbye season.
Yes, in 22 parts.
Spread out over the next 22 years.
Yeah. But this is the cool thing about it though, right? Because like we're talking about, you know, if we were monks, if we were sort of going to a monastic lifestyle, like we'd be leaving behind really good stuff. You know, like books, right? Like beautiful, important, like work, you know, if it's a good sort of like vocation, like all of these guys, right? All these monks are in this monastery, like they're committed to this life. They're not running away from anything, right? As if it's like the one guy says, like, we're not here because we're running, like we're drug addicts or alcoholics who are running away from some sort of profligate lifestyle. Like we are people who have closed this chapter of our lives because we simply want to like better know the Lord and immerse ourselves into a lifestyle where we can fully know him and fully live out the commandments and just sort of live this very deeply Christian lifestyle. You know, the calling, it keeps coming up. The calling is a very positive calling, not a negative calling. I'm not here because I'm running away from my gambling addiction or my porn addiction or my, you know, my drink addiction or whatever it is. Like I'm running towards the Lord because I can't, me personally, right? The, you know, the monks in the film, because I can't find him or draw closer to him out there in the same way that I can here, which I think is this beautiful, beautiful like light into this calling.
Well, and one of the guys even said it kind of like this, in this way of like, because ultimately whenever you're running away from something, you're just trying to run away from the things about yourself that you hate. Yeah. And like, whenever you, like wherever you end up, you know, to quote the great father among the saints, Yogi Berra, wherever I go, there I am. Like that's the reality. Wherever I go, there I am. And I can have this issue here, or I can have this issue in a monastery, or I can have this issue, you know, I could have this issue with the fox. I could have this issue in a box. I could have this issue with a mouse. I could have it in a house. I could have it in the rain. I could have it on a train. I could have it in a park. I could have it in the dark. And like, it just doesn't matter. Wherever I go, there I am. And I love that idea, right, of having to come eventually face to face with who you really are. And only in turning toward the Lord can like that actually be worked out and worked on and kind of like find, you know, this healing and this salvation that's there. And like the church ultimately exists, I think, as this again, like, yes, it's a haven, but it's not like an escape hatch. No. You know, like I think we might even feel that way, like we want to go there to like escape things, but it definitely isn't, because at the end of the day we still have to deal with ourselves.
Totally. You know? And this is a very universal thing, right? Like, you know, most of the people who are in the church are not going to be monastics at some point, but I think we've talked about this. I think I've talked about this with my buddy Marcus, who's another marriage and family therapist as well. Like, this is something that people, I think, sometimes do intentionally, unconsciously, whatever it is, like even in relationships, that people will sort of like seek after marriage as if, you know, like if I get married, right, that is where, you know, like I'm going to find the person who's going to complete me and everything is going to be fine after that. Or, you know, if I get the right sort of job or move to the right city or whatever it is, like I think sometimes like all of us in our own particular mode of life, whatever that might look like, we have this sense that like, if I can go here, if I can flee my present situation, that's where I'm going to overcome whatever it is that is holding me back. But again, that's that sort of escapist thinking. Like you carry your character with you wherever you are, that the secret sort of groanings of your heart, they're with you, even if you move cities, even if you change jobs, even if you sort of, you know, dump one person and go to another. Yeah.
The way that I love this. Have you ever read this?
I've got it on my shelf. Yeah.
So good. So in this collection, there's this quote from Abba Anthony. One of his sayings is that he said, also, he who wishes to live in solitude in the desert is delivered from 3 conflicts: hearing, speech, and sight. There is only one conflict for him, and that is with fornication. Mm-hmm. And like, I love that idea, right? So it's like, yeah, it's the seeing, the saying, the hearing, like that's not going to be an issue, but it's still going to be like up in here, you know, like, you know, even if you go out there, like, it's still like, if you're all by yourself, like you still have to wrestle with this reality that like the sinful like thoughts and the passions like live within you, you know, there is no escaping of these things. Like you still have to deal with them. And I think that's also in some ways too why there's that other thing that he says, like, whoever wishes to be saved, like, do 3 things, right? Pay attention to what I tell you. Whoever you may be, always have God before your eyes. Whatever you do, do it according to the testimony of the Holy Scriptures. And in whatever place you live, do not easily leave it. Keep these 3 precepts and you will be saved. Like, that's really good stuff, because like the first 2 seem pretty obvious to me, right? Always have God before your eyes, do things according to the Scriptures, and just stay put. Like stay where you are, because ultimately that's going to be the thing that like everything bubbles to the surface, because you're always running from thing to thing. Again, sayings of the Desert Fathers, y'all. Check it out. Benedict Award. So good.
Because that's where you were planted. That's where like you will come to know yourself over time. And that's where like you will know yourself like through others as well. I mean, The longer you spend in a particular place, the more you sort of get into your routines, the more you kind of like unpack the longings of your heart, the more people who are around you get to sort of like get to know you and reveal what is in your heart. I mean, it's funny, like this, like a random thing that's, oh, there's a, I guess the first thing that comes to me, so we have like the system of youth safety that we do at work in our capacity is kind of like, youth ministries. And one of the things that, people who have a sketchy past, like people who are sort of like more at risk of abusing kids will tend to do is like they move around a lot. Like they're constantly sort of like fleeing crimes that they have committed as they're sort of going around, right? Because like if you're always the new person in town, your past, you're sort of evading your past and your past is never catching up to you. You're constantly sort of like this tension between who you are and the stuff that you're doing and the way that you're presenting yourself. And when people get to know you, you sort of leave.
Right.
And I'm not saying like, to that level of like fleeing your felonies or anything like that happens, but it's certainly easy to flee yourself and to always kind of like have this facade that you were giving people. If there's always this sense of newness, if there's always this sense of like new place, new house, new city, whatever it is, I get to construct myself. And then when I don't like the people are sort of like, cracking through the thin veneer, the thin candy shell that's on the outside, then you leave and you do it again. But when you spend the rest of your life, right, you think about Father Basil, he looks like he's a young guy. He could potentially spend 40, 50 years in this monastery with this group of, 24 other fathers.
Right.
They're going to get to know him really well.
Right. The for some reason too, like, I don't know if you felt this way as you were watching this, and when they talked about like, and every time they mentioned like, and I'll be here till I die, I was like, oh dang, like, like, and I kept thinking like, if this is like this path of salvation, right? And we kind of put marriage in a similar category, like in this way of kind of like the formation of a domestic monastery in some ways, right?
Yeah.
Like that, we don't ever, I think, at least in my experience, ever, I feel like emphasize the gravity of that in the same way as like becoming a monk. It's like, oh, you two love each other and it's so great, and you're gonna have this like really beautiful wedding. Like, what's your dress gonna look like, and what's the party gonna be like, and what's the whatever. And I feel like maybe some of the pastoral thing needs to be like, okay, two are gonna be with each other until you die. And like this is the thing that we really need to hone in on. Like this is like it's a monastic vow in some ways. It's not like maybe like exactly that, obviously, but the commitment level is exactly the same, and it should be just as weighty, because like it felt like this thing of like, okay, he's there and he's looking toward it and he's constantly kind of like having to like bolster himself up a little bit to get there. I mean, like there's moments when I like, as I was listening to him, I thought like, oh, he's talking himself into this in some ways.
The fear kind of percolates. You can see he's kind of like, nope, I'm going to be here until I die.
Yeah. which is funny because like I don't feel like that ever just gets really super addressed for like new like couples who are getting married. Of like, are you sure?
Yeah.
Are you sure you're sure? Are you sure you're sure you're sure you're sure?
Because a time is going to come when you're not sure.
Yeah.
And one of the monks talks about this as well, right? Like he talks about how, you have this sense of consolation when you first enter the monastery and after you get sort of tantraed, right? And you look around and the air is kind of clear and sparkling and the icons are glittering in the church, and you look at the faces of these brothers and you sort of respect them and you love them, and the fields are beautiful and your job is beautiful, and like you have this sense of like, I'm home, I belong. And then suddenly you wake up one morning and you're like, these hymns again. I've heard these hymns a million.
This guy.
Right? Yeah, exactly. Father so-and-so with his stupid face and his stupid beard. Right?
Oh, he's chanting again.
and that's it. Like, and the very things that gave you delight are the things that suddenly you find like tiresome and you want to flee. And that is just that happens in a relationship, that happens at work, that happens like in the brotherhood, right? Like that's just a human thing.
Yeah.
You get tired of stuff and you get tired of people. And he just kind of says like, but you're here for the long run. Like, and that is not the challenge, right? I love the way that he phrases it. It's not that that's a sign of spiritual failure when you look into the face of your brothers and you realize you're tired of them, when you hear the hymns, that's actually an invitation to progress, because it's no longer about the good feeling. It's actually about the Lord in that moment. It's actually about loving those monks in that moment. It's actually about the hard spiritual work
instead of what you get out of it. Which you know, that song, is it, who's it by? That one guy is like, I like me better when I'm with you. Like that song, I'm like, that is the most narcissistic song of all time. Like, I like you because I like me better when I'm with you.
Yes.
Like that's I like the way you make me feel. I like the way like,
and when you don't make me feel like that anymore,
yep,
I'm out.
Toodaloo.
Sucker.
Oopsies. Yep. So here's a little bit of a funny story that I'm a little hesitant to tell, but I'm going to tell it anyway because I think it's funny, and you might not think that it's as funny as I do, but I think that it's funny. So there was one time my friends and I took a road trip up to a monastery in Northern California. We drove from like it was like a evening liturgy of some kind for Theophany. We were celebrating it for some reason at night. And right after that, we drove up to a monastery that was on the old calendar in Northern California to celebrate the Christmas Vigil. And so it was like it was a long drive. It was like probably 9 or 10 hours to get there. And we drove all through the night. We got my buddy's aunt's house. We spent the night there. We went, or the morning there, and then we went to the monastery in the afternoon. And for some reason, like, there was just this guy that was there that I don't remember if I don't think he was one of the monks, but like he kept just like kind of chanting or like doing an Eson very loudly, like by himself. He's like, and he kept like, and that was exactly what it felt like. He was just like going full diva. And so for the rest of the trip, we just kept referring to this guy as the soloist. And like, I don't know why, it was just the funniest thing. We were like, oh, the soloist. Yeah. Like, but it was all in the service, and none of us talked about it during the service or whatever. Yeah. And then I think what happened is like one of my buddies referred to the soloist, like just called him the soloist. And we were like, we all knew who the guy that he was talking about. Yeah. Because we all had the thought. But I was thinking, like, imagine being in a monastery with that dude. You'd be like, this guy.
Yes.
This guy with his thing. Doing
totally.
Thing. You know? Oh,
totally.
Lord have mercy.
Totally. Yeah, I hear that. I had a similar experience when the first time I went to Mount Athos. I visited a couple of monasteries each just for a day. And one of the monasteries that I went to, there was a guy who was a novice there. And for whatever reason, he was the guy who was like showing us around and having a lot of like interaction with us. And he was just like this very kind of like overly casual guy who was like overly cynical and overly whatever. And he's like, oh yeah, and that's what we do with this. And like, yeah, but that kind of sucks. And like, we're doing this. And like, yeah, whatever. And like, he was the guy who was the face, like the self-appointed face of the monastery. And
Father Strongbad, we're going to need you to come back inside for a little bit. Oh, holy crap. This is what I do with the feed the chicken. And that kind of sucks. That kind of stuff.
Father the cheat.
Yeah. Father the cheat does not speak English. Yes, Father.
But that's totally it though. Like, and that's the thing. It's like, when you realize you have a sibling that you don't get along with, or you have somebody in your building you don't get along with, or, when you're in college and you get sort of assigned to a roommate and you realize you don't get along with your roommate, like you're stuck there for a year or whatever it is. Like, that's just life. And we can so often see it as the obstacle. We can so often see it as like this bad luck or this bad fortune. But the real kind of like, do you have eyes to see this as like, this becomes the opportunity to dig deeper and to love when it's harder and the consolation is not there. Man.
I know, it's a lot.
The soloist. That's a great. I enjoyed that story. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, every now and then.
Very relatable.
You just think about it and it cracks me up. So one of the things that, is interesting here, like this idea, I think, of wholly committed, right? Like, because that's what they kept talking about. Like, the men who come here, like they want to be, singularly committed to the spiritual life and all of this kind of stuff. And each of them kind of talked about it in this way, like, yes, of like this call, right? This call to follow Christ, to leave everything behind that would get in the way. Um, I sort of felt like, okay, I can definitely appreciate that, like that they're going and doing this, and like this is their life and this is their whatever. But, and I don't know what it was, but I started almost feeling like, I think like guilty throughout it. Like, oh, like they're the ones who really are taking this seriously, or like kind of feeling like, wait, but the call is for all of us to do that, right? Like, isn't the call for all of us to be wholly committed to Christ? And like, isn't the call for all of us to kind of leave everything in some capacity, right? Like, and go, it's just, I think it just became really hard for me as I was watching the movie to not feel like they're somehow better than I am.
Yeah.
I mean, don't get me wrong, they are better than I am, but I think where my struggle was, I felt like they were better than me because they were monks, because they chose the monastic way. Right? Like that they're just better. Like they're better as people, or they're like more serious Christians. And again, they are better people and they are more serious Christians than I am. But in my thought, it was because they were becoming monks. Does that make any sense? Like what I'm trying to differentiate here or distinguish between?
Yes. As if that is the higher call.
Yes, that path is somehow inherently a better path. Like to go 100%, or to like to even go like 20% on the monastic route is like better than 150 down like the married in the world way.
Yeah.
You know? Like they're automatically closer. It's like the game of life, but instead of going to college, or wait, I can't remember. I know like the career, like you just go right into a career, but I think if you take college, it's like you can get a better job or something. I don't exactly know how that works. I don't remember that game very well, but
because that was built off of like a 1960s economy where you did not need to get like 20 years of higher education to get a job that pays, whatever.
$10 an hour.
Yeah.
But it sort of feels like that's the option. It's like you're given this thing and like one gets you straight into the economy and you're making more money right out of the gate, or like whatever, like whatever it is. So I don't know.
Yeah, that's fair. And I think that is kind of, it's something that a lot of people take for granted. And I think you hear it kind of bandied about in Orthodox Christian circles a lot. Like that is the sort of angelic path. That is the higher path. We are out here because of our weakness, whatever it is. But it's interesting to me because I think like this is one of those many situations where we just have to sort of live in that tension. Because as best I can see, the healthiest sort of approximation of it is lay people out in the world feeling that way about monks, and monks in monasteries feeling that way about us. And a constant sense of humility about our own path, and kind of like a greater deference to the other. And I'll give you two reasons I think why that is. One, you see that in the documentary itself, where one of the guys, he talks about how his profligate his life was in his teens, his 20s, or whatever it is. And he says, at some point I realized I couldn't live out the commandments of the Lord out in the world, so I had to come here. And I think if you sort of press that, right, like there are a lot of monks who will tell you they went to the monastery because of their weakness. It is a place that was easier for them in order to like live the commandments of Christ. And I've heard this like directly from the mouths of monks many times. I remember one time I was visiting and I had gotten to know some of these monks because it was like a place that I would go to again and again. And we're having coffee, I think after liturgy or something, right? We're just like a bunch of the visitors who were there. And one of the guys is like, "Father, I don't know how you do it. You wake up in the middle of the night and you pray for all these hours, and then you go to service for all these hours, and you have this, this obedience. Like, I don't know how you do it." And the father kind of like looks at him with a smile and he says, "You have kids, right? I don't know how you do it. I don't know how you wake up at 2 a.m. when your kid has a fever and you kind of like spend hours rocking them to sleep, and you change diapers, and there's accidents and they pee or poop on you sometimes. And like you make house payments and car payments, and you argue with your wife, and your kids talk back to you. Like, I don't know how you do it. I come here because I get to hear beautiful chanting and I have these beautiful views of the mountains and so forth. Like, this is easy. I came here because it's easy. It seems to me like you were doing the hard work." And at the end of the day, I feel kind of like that's one way to think about calling. Like calling is the sort of the place that just kind of feels more natural for us. Like there are some guys who are just not built to be fathers or husbands or whatever it is. And they go there because it is easier for them to wake up at 5 a.m. and to read Psalms all night and so forth. And that's their path. And if they have a humble heart, they're going to look at folks like you in the world and be like, "I don't know how he does it." And then you have us here who it's like, I can't see myself doing that. It is easier for me to have a wife and to have kids and to have a job, right? And I have humility before them. I kind of feel like that's kind of the tension of the Christian life. Like, it's, our callings are sort of where it is most natural for us. And if we're doing it right, we are doing it with a level of gratitude and humility for the other side. Like, so like, it is good for us in the world to be like, the monastic calling is the higher calling. But I also think it's beautiful when I have conversations with monks who are like, I'm here because it's easy. Your job out there is harder. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So you're helping me, because I think you're helping me realize that my calling is to my bed, because that's where things feel very easy for me. Like, I'll just serve God from here. Like, someone's got to sleep for the sins of the world.
I don't want to shoot cartel coffee all over my microphone, because that would be a premature end to the podcast.
Indeed, it would.
And a waste of delicious, delicious coffee.
So it would be definitely.
So I think it's the tension between, like, what is natural, right? I think, like, when we talk about a call, God is calling us to this thing that is just kind of the most natural fit, right? It's not easy in the sense of being indulgent. It's not because like, even the monks talk about this with their call. Like, it's not that it's easy to be a monk, but there's kind of like, how does one of them say it? He said it so beautifully, and I wanted to write it down. He's like, you have a sense of God's call, not because it's easy, because it feels natural, or it feels unforced, or something like that. Like, it's hard to wake up and go to church. It's hard to wake up and feed the chickens. It's hard. All of that is like sweaty. It's dirty. It's difficult. It's hard to pray all night. But like, there is peace here. And that's why I know that I'm called to this. And you, I mean, you're like, you have a child who turned 1 year old today, and like, being the dad of one child, let alone 3 childs, is not easy. But like, there's peace when you see her with her birthday crown and she's like smiling and cute, and you do all the other hard dad stuff, but there's also like these moments of peace. I don't know, am I making any sense? Like, it's the difference between sort of indulgent kind of like easiness, as opposed to
right. I guess, like, what maybe though, what, as much as it feels like, yeah, that's this is like where I'm, where we're called, or whatever, is into this world here now, with whatever our lives are. I mean, because that's also the truth. Like, basically, wherever you are is where you've been called.
Yeah.
And because you're being primarily called to Christ himself, right? Like, that is our primary calling, is to toward Christ, to become like him, to be transformed and to be renewed. But I think that, like, what I'm trying to say is, it's like, it feels to me like there's this sense of like, oh, well, they're fully committed to Christ because they left things like dirty diapers, and they left things like, house payments, and they left things like that. So they like, we're so easily distracted by these kind of like vain activities, or kind of meaningless endeavors in some ways, like that. I don't know if I'm making any sense, but it feels like they just have a better starting point.
Maybe.
Because I can understand what you're saying in terms of like valuing the tension that's there.
Yeah.
But I guess I feel like my question is, like, amidst, there's so many distractions, right? There's so many things to like pull us, or to that we can indulge ourselves in. Like, do I want a bottle of wine tonight? Like, yeah, we like, let's split a bottle of wine, honey. Let's go get 3 bottles of, like, there's just so many opportunities to like do whatever. And we never have 3 bottles of wine in a night. I don't know why I said that, but I'm just like saying that, like, there's like this option, right? Of like, how often do I want this thing? And I guess it feels hard to me to be like, they're not somehow better than I am, because there aren't really like opportunities for those to indulge in things. Like, we have so many opportunities, and it feels like anything beyond the level of, prayer or whatever in the world, like sitting and watching Netflix, like, how is that spiritually benefit? I don't know. I'm just trying to make sense of it. Don't get me wrong. I like watching Netflix. I want to watch Netflix. I don't want to not watch Netflix. But like, I think it's that very reason that makes me think that they're better than I am, because they left to go not do that.
Fair. Fair. And I think that becomes kind of a question of one's inner spiritual state. Like here's a way to think
Don't talk to
about
me
it.
about my inner spiritual state. I don't want to talk about that crap, Steve. Just tell me how to be better than the monks. All right, tell me how to
Not
be better than the
interested.
monks.
Well, so even going back to like the advice
kidding.
from Abba Anthony, right? That here,
Yes.
like here's the thing that I think I didn't understand fully for a long period of time. Like where he says, the distractions that you have in the world are those three, and then you have like the distraction of fornication at the monastery. And for the longest time, I was like, how does that work? Like there are no women for them to look at a monastery. Like there are no like iPads and sort of like internet. Like where is the spirit of fornication coming from? And yet you read other stuff about Abba, like from Abba Anthony and the others, they'll talk about the noonday demon, and they'll talk about just kind of like reclining in your cell and not doing anything and sort of ignoring your prayers and gossiping with your brothers. And, there are ways to be sort of a lazy gadabout anywhere. You don't need Netflix to be a lazy gadabout.
But
that's the thing. It totally helps. It totally helps.
Pushes me further down that path.
It totally helps. It totally helps. That is 100% true. And I think, but again, like, if you were to ask a monk why he is running to the monastery, it's not because he's kind of like fleeing distractions. It's because he's loving the Lord. And if you were to ask like a man, right, like, why are you marrying this woman or whatever it is? Like, why are you choosing to have kids? It's not like I'm fleeing laziness or whatever it is. It's like, because I'm moving towards this person that I love and this kind of like this vocation that God is like putting out for me. So it's like, I don't want to undermine the sense of like this kind of humble awe for the calling of somebody else. But I also think like we have to like kind of like live in that tension. Like our lives are hard too. And I don't know that we, like all of us are kind of like voluntarily taking up crosses in a similar sort of way. I think we just have to kind of like navigate that sense between, humility and despair. Like we could be humble before the life of the monks, but we also should avoid the sense of like, I'm not a real Christian, or they're the only real Christians, or, you know what I mean? It's like, it's hard, but,
because I've definitely seen people come in and out of the church, like who show up at like different parishes I've gone to or whatever, and they have like these relationships with the monasteries.
Yeah.
And there's this sense of like that's where they do real orthodoxy. And like we've even had people saying like, things like I think I need to go get like the abbot of the monastery to be my spiritual father, since like this just isn't serious enough for me.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like I think an understandable way to feel. And like also, but like I remember like even just like saying that, I'm like, that feels so yucky to me. Like, and maybe it's just because I don't want to be told that I'm not taking my faith seriously or whatever. I don't know if that makes sense.
No, which we need, we need to be open to that. And again, it's that tension between humility and despair. Like I think I've had conversations with people at monasteries, and it's people who kind of fall into this, like, I'm in the real world, right? I'm outside in the world because I am lazy, because and I'm not going to sort of achieve salvation. Like this is the only way to salvation or whatever it is. And that those seem to be thoughts that are like dangerously close to despair.
Yeah.
I wish I didn't have this wife. I wish I didn't have these kids. I wish I had the strength to sort of like be here at this monastery. But like, that's actually demonic. I mean,
it is so demonic. Yeah.
Like in the same way that if a monk was doing the same thing and like, I wish I didn't have this monastery. I wish I didn't have this abbot. I wish I didn't have these brothers. I wish I had a whatever. Like that's demonic. That is again, this dissatisfaction with where you are, which is born of this like desire to skate over your actual problems and skate over the actual state of your soul and escape rather than work it
hubris,
out.
It's hubris. This idea that somehow like I've got the idea about how things ought to be, or how I should be, or how this should be, or how you should be, or how the world should be, or how orthodoxy should be, or what our bishop should do, or what our priest should say, or what our whatever should. It's just this kind of like, and the hard part is like, you might be right. You know what I mean? Like maybe your priest should do that. I don't know. Like, or maybe your bishop should do that. I don't know.
Yeah.
But like, there are many who die who deserve life, and there are many who live who deserve death. who are you, Frodo Baggins, to dole that out? Like, I mean, like that's like the thing of like, who put you in the position, Frodo, to have any? You're just a freaking hobbit to be able to like say anything about
a young 50-year-old hobbit.
Yeah, you're just a whippersnapper, you young 50-year-old. That's cute. I remember when I was 50. Says Gandalf. He's like, oh,
thousands of years ago.
Yeah, exactly. But like, I think that like that's like one of the big things that is, you know, like you just don't see that in Christ, right? Like that's like, so Saint Silouan, and I mean, really, like I think in all across like, you know, Orthodox tradition, but like I'm most recently acquainted with the writings of Silouan, and like the things that he said. Like he focuses a lot on this idea of obedience, like as the path to humility and salvation, and like all of this kind of stuff. Like that becomes kind of like the ultimate. And this has been something I feel like that's been coming up a lot because all of us are being told to do things we don't want to do right now. You know, like we're all staying inside. We're not going to church. We're not going to Pascha. We're, you know, it's after Pascha and we're still doing this thing. And like, there's just a lot of that going around of like, this is not going the way we thought it was going to go. You know, like basically that's the slogan of 2020s. This is not going to go the way you think. And here we are.
Episode 8, best movie confirmed.
You know, I think I kind of agree. It definitely has had like, I think the longest lasting impact of things to think about.
1000%. But anyway, tangent. I'm sorry to derail. Yeah.
Just we're running out of gas for hours and hours and hours. That's basically the whole thing that helps you know where they're at in the movie. We've only got 17 hours left of gas. We've only got 12 hours left of gas. We've only got 9 hours left of gas. They've only got 6 hours left of gas. Ray! They only have 3 hours. That's my imitation of Finn, which I realized as I watched Rise of Skywalker again recently, that he exists basically to scream.
Kinda.
He's always yelling.
Yes.
Ray! Paul! Chewie! They got Chewie!
It's coming to Disney Plus on May 4th. So I will watch it again without paying for it again. That's my goal.
Oh, you'll pay for it.
Oh. Thumbs down confirmed.
Hey! It's just a lot of fun. There's a lot of fun, that movie. Anyway, I don't even remember what I was talking about. It's probably not worth mentioning. Obedience.
No. Obedience and how we're all sort of stuck doing these things, and it's after Pascha, and we're still stuck in this weird kind of,
And everyone has an idea about how things should be, including myself. Like I certainly have a lot of like, well, here's what they should have done. Yes. Like, let me tell the CDC how they should have done this thing.
Yeah.
You know?
Hey, Dr. Fauci.
Yeah. Listen here, buddy. Like, it's just like the most arrogant attitude ever. Yes. Like, it's almost comical. Like, who am I? I'm just a guy. I'm literally just a guy. And I'm like, let me tell you a thing or two.
I once read a BuzzFeed article with the top 10 things about contagious diseases. So listen here.
It's just like preposterous. Like, I don't know what we should have done. I have literally no freaking clue. But I do know that I'm unhappy.
Yes,
and that's why I'm trying to tell you what should have happened.
Yes.
Right. And that's ultimately what it comes down to, is like this weird obsession with like our own control, this weird obsession with our own thoughts and our own perspectives and our opinions, and like the church stands before us as this like restoration therapy, and like says, just like humble yourselves, and like things will go a lot better, right? If we all just were like, well, they know better than we do, there would be like no bitterness about any of this. Like, well, we're just doing what we're told. Yeah. Because they know better.
Yeah.
They're the ones who are in charge. We are not the ones who are in charge. Let us do as we are commanded. And like, what's there to worry about then? Nobody
Which
wants
is
my
so,
opinion. Nobody
but
wants
it's,
my opinion about this, Steve. Nobody cares. They
this is
don't care that
so
I've played
hard.
Pandemic a bunch of times and that I know that if we just put like a research facility in wherever,
In Sheboygan, everything will be fine.
Yes. We just need the operations manager to set one up and he can carry 5 cards at once. So like if like or whatever he's called.
But that's what it's such an American thing though, right? It's like,
Yes.
I know better, like I have to be heard, like especially a social media kind of American thing. And I love that. I love that line that you said, like, it's all I know is I'm unhappy in the midst of all of this. And I have to wonder, like, connected to what those monks were saying, connected to that whole thing about like, wherever you are, be slow to leave. Like a person who actually has peace within their heart is going to be happy when the quarantine lifts, is going to be happy in the midst of the quarantine, is going to be happy in a cave, in a monastery somewhere, is going to be happy in an apartment in the city somewhere. Like if we're actually carrying around the peace of God at all times, like what can shake that? Right? Like it is not the quarantine or the pandemic that is making us unhappy. It is simply like a new situation that brings us out of our comfort zone and reveals something that had already sort of been percolating beneath the surface that maybe wasn't coming out because I had constructed this life that was comfortable for me.
Well, and even as you were saying that, like what it got me thinking of is like, blessed are the pure of heart, right?
Yeah.
Like, for they shall see God. And I think like our idea of like purity almost always these days gets tied to like sexuality for some reason. Like
Always.
like
Because
whenever
we're
we
like
talk
a post-Puritan culture. Like that's what's
Yes.
always on our minds.
Yeah, but like that's what that like purity is almost always about like sexual stuff, and it has nothing to do with any other issue often, right? Like our pureness of mind is whether or not we're thinking about sex.
Yeah.
But really, when you think about like what a pure substance is, right? A substance that is pure is that it's singular. Like it is one thing, right? When you say that it's pure gold, it's pure. It
There's
means
no
that
impurities.
there's nothing
other
else.
stuff.
Yes,
Yeah.
there's no other stuff. And so like a heart that is pure is a heart that is singular in its focus, is singular in its intentionality, it's singular in what it wants, right? That's what it means to have purity of heart. Like that we come with the singularity of focus. And that is why if we're pure of heart, we shall see God. Because we'll have like we won't want to see anything else. We won't be looking for anything else. We won't be, tainted in any other way, whether it's by our own, I mean, this is why like a divided heart you can feel that, right? That's the opposite of a pure heart is a divided heart.
Yeah.
Is like a, like that's what it means for it to be impure. And I feel like if we had that kind of purity of heart, the reason that we would be joyful or happy or whatever kind of, word, but I mean, that is right. Happy are the pure in heart. Blessed are the pure in heart. Like fortunate, they're in good favor because all they want is to draw close to the Lord. And there's nothing that can get in the way of doing that. You can draw near to him with a fox. You can draw near to him in a box. You can draw near to him with a mouse, and you can draw near to him in a house. You can draw near to him in the rain, and you can draw near to him on a train.
True. I love that. That's the second Seuss reference of the day.
Which happens to be exactly the same as the first Seuss reference of the day.
Yeah. On a related tangent, did you see that video that was going around of the guy who raps Dr. Seuss books to like Dr. Dre beats?
No, that's hilarious.
I have to send you this video afterwards because it's like the best thing on the internet.
I'm excited right now.
But I love that though. Like a pure gold is just gold. A pure heart is just human heart. It's just human heart. And I'm reminded of, I think it's Dimitri Stanilai who talks about like, this is like the climax of the incarnation, right? Like the Son of God takes on flesh, he dies, he resurrects, he ascends. And I think he has this beautiful line, like a human heart now beats at the center of the Trinity.
Snap.
Right? And if our heart is pure, if our heart is truly human, like our heart participates in the heart of Christ and beats at the center of the Trinity. And of course, that's like, it's no surprise that we would see God because a human heart is there beating right now. The human heart is there beating right now in this ascended Lord who sits at the right hand of the Father. What does that mean? I have no idea, but like a human heart beats at the Trinity. And if our hearts can be human and not have jealousies and insecurities and the other sort of, lesser metals, that get in the way. We can see him anywhere.
Yeah.
I'm not going to quote Dr. Seuss again, but see.
Will you quote Dr. Dre though?
I would never forget about Dre.
You can't forget about him.
No, you can't.
And I was going to say, like, you know, those beats that Christ has are way better than Dre's beats. The heartbeats of Jesus are better than Dre's beats by Dre. Beats
I agree.
By Dre beats.
Beats by JC.
Beats. Yeah, you know me. I'm down with JC. I love that G-O-D.
Oh my goodness. And the Trinity.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway,
we're off the rails.
Let us move on to a back thing about this New Men documentary. One other thing that I really loved in this. I mean, there's a lot of things I think that are really valuable to this. So there's like a fruit fly or something trying to get me on my nose. It was just the brotherhood itself, you know, like,
yeah.
There was just these moments, and like I said, there was things that kind of caught me off guard, and like they were just a bunch of dudes.
Mm-hmm.
Like there was the moments where I'm just like, oh, you guys are just guys.
Yeah.
Like when they're like throwing the trash into like the thing, and the guy's like, just throw it, and like you can see like you can almost imagine sometimes where it would be like how far away do you think I can make? Like I could almost see like that being a thing that happens. Like, should we try to see how far back we can get the truck today? You know what I mean? Like, it's just like...
Because it's just guys.
Because it's just dudes being dudes still. And, like, there was a moment when they were having choir practice, and I was just laughing because I'm like, dude, this sounds like choir practice. Like, this isn't just... This is in a monastery, but it's still just choir practice. And they're like, F sharp, A, and there's a... and does that seem high? Yeah, that seems high. You know, like... like, dude, this is like... There's so many times, like, you know, at church where maybe like the choir director pitches something a little bit high, and we're singing, like, because I'm a tenor and we're trying to sing like maybe like one of those E's, those high E's, but it actually feels more like you're trying to sing like a third above that because of the way that he pitched it. And you're like, oh, normally I have no problem reaching that pitch, but right now that seems really high. And cracking. And it just, there's times like I'll turn to, you know, my brother-in-law, who's also a tenor in the choir, but I mean, not usually, not these days, but like turn to him and just be like, is it high? Is that high? He's like, totally.
Super.
Yeah. So I just loved that, you know, and like they go grocery shopping, and there was that moment where they're like all on the front porch or something, like after one of the services before they, you know, go to bed or whatever. And I was like, this is so funny. Like, it's just like, look at them being dudes together.
Yes.
Cracking jokes and, you know, laughing with each other.
Yeah.
Made me happy.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
And because it's again, it's like, it's authentic life. And and it's people who don't set their personhood aside and don't set their dudeness aside. Which is amazing, right? And this, I guess it goes back to that thing you were talking about at the top of the podcast about, like, there are some things about the film that were not surprising. Like this, okay, this is the monasticism I have in my mind. But then there's also these moments that are like, really? Like that's kind of the surprising, like, wow. I remember like the first time I went to a monastery, I went there after taking the bar exam years ago. And like first monastery that I go to, I'm sitting there, like I hiked up the mountain to get there. And the guest master just starts ripping into me. And he's just like telling lawyer joke after lawyer joke after lawyer joke.
And you're like,
and I was like so taken aback by it. And then he just kind of like, I think, sees my concern, and he comes over and he just gives me a hug, and he's like, I'm just joking. I just wanted to put a smile on your face. And like, you know, cause I was scandalized by it at first, because it's like, he's telling jokes on the holy mountain. Do they tell jokes on the holy mountain? And it's like, yeah, they tell jokes on the holy mountain, you know, and
we've talked about this before, I think, but like at one point there's a hunter that goes to visit St. Anthony, and he sees that like all the brothers are just kind of like having some free time, hanging out, and he's totally scandalized by that. I think we've talked about this before, right?
The bow, but it's good, yeah.
Yeah, and he has him shoot like 3 arrows, and he just says, do it again. He's using his bow. He's like, Father, I can't, like, you know, keep shooting arrows, otherwise my bow's gonna snap. There'll be too much tension on it. And he goes like, it's the same way with the brethren, right? Like like you just gotta, at some points you just gotta like turn off the engine for a little bit, and let it
Yeah.
cool down, and then rev back up, and even like too, I was listening to some talk from a priest last week about stuff during Bright Week, and he's like, one of the things you might notice as we live stream services is like that the services are shorter this week. Like the Vespers, for example, doesn't go as long, or like whatever it might be. And part of that is just because the church is like, you guys were just like doing a marathon for the last like 50 days.
Yeah.
Take it easy this week. Still say your prayers, still do whatever, but like just take it easy for a hot second. Catch your breath. Just enjoy the food, enjoy the whatever, like, but then like let's get back at it next week.
Yeah.
It's cool.
Yeah. And that's why, honestly, I love this podcast so much, because I feel like that balance is what we try to do here. I mean, it's to be candid about it, like these are the sorts of conversations we would have if nobody was watching.
Yes.
These are the sorts of conversations I had at seminary with my buddies when nobody was watching. These are the conversations that I've had with like literally monks on cliff sides on Mount Athos, with American monks who maybe sort of like got pop culture. And I could have, like, obviously they had been detached from things for a while, but we can sort of like, I can reference the Ghostbusters or something to a monk that grew up in the States. Right. And we can have a chuckle about Bill Murray or something. And like, and that's the thing, like it's, and there's this insecurity sometimes that we have, or this kind of like the sense that it has to be dour, it has to be joyless, it has to be whatever. And it's going to be sober at times. And the same monks who are trying to, outdo each other in throwing the trash bags onto the back of the truck, right? Hey, everybody, throw it on the new guy.
Just hazing him.
Yeah. Father Justin.
Hey, Father Justin, come out. I need your help with something. I need you to help me. Just do it. No, just come out. Close your eyes. Just close your eyes. Oh, man. Oh, no. I think I lost you. Did I get lost? Am I the one who's lost? Oh, no.
Oop,
oh, we're
froze.
back.
Okay, sorry.
We're back. Okay, there we go.
Yeah, so
Okay.
like those same monks, right, are the same monks who will then clean up and put their vestments on and will be kind of like sober, like during the awe-inspiring mysteries, right? Like when it's time to be sober, when it's time to be serious, they will be sober and serious. But when it's time to just kind of like chuckle and tell a joke and make your brother laugh because it's been a long day, like you do so. Like that's what it is to be a human being, I mean, and there's joy in that.
It does not involve throwing trash on other people. That
it
is
does
not
not
part of. Yeah.
I love that happened, and then of course like the my connection goes mute, so I can't like retract it. Yes, throw it on Father Justin. No.
I just love the idea of setting up for that. Like, hey, Father, can you come back out here? I need your help with something. Shh! Don't say anything. Don't say that. All right, get him. Oh, it's so sad. Poor Father Justin.
Now he's ready to be a monk. Do you still want to take your vow?
All right, guys,
No!
this is going to be the hardest week of your lives. All right?
It's Greek week at the monastery.
Oh, man. This is bad.
Okay.
Oh, man.
Admittedly, we do tend to get off the rails a little bit more than actual holy people will. But
which hut are you rushing for? Which hut are you going to rush for?
I'm going to the ski to St. Anne, son. How about you? Anyway.
Yes.
Yes. So it's 1:51. We're at like 9 minutes left. Do you have any kind of like? Is there any last thing you want to highlight? Do you want to maybe turn it over to questions?
Well, I do. I think there is like one thing I think that you mentioned in here that I think is valuable, because I sort of feel like there's a tension that we run into in our own lives, kind of like this, like, false piety versus kind of like actual piety, or like false monasticism versus kind of like real monasticism, or like I think that there is that dynamic of like wanting things to appear like a particular way other than what they really are.
Mm.
And you know, you kind of mentioned it in the outline, so I would love to just hear you say some stuff about that, like, you know, just the idea of like
Oh,
real versus surface level stuff.
sure. We've talked about this in different contexts in the past. Um, I think like, you know, there's times I think like the difference between orthodoxy and Orthodox Christianity. And I think orthodoxy can somehow be kind of like a superficial formalistic thing, right? It's like when people give feedback about our videos and they're scandalized by the fact that we have just background videos in episodes of The Trench or episodes of Be the Bee or whatever it is. And they're like, what you need to do is have chant music in the background. And it's like, no, we're not going to take prayer and reduce it to mere background noise to look orthodox. You know, we're not going to slap an icon on something, like as we said at the top, right? Just to sort of make it look orthodox. It's about like what actually is. It's about like actual sort of like Orthodox Christianity rather than the superficial thing. And this is kind of a pet peeve of mine, because you have this film, this beautiful film, gives us like a real look into real monasticism, which is these people who are giving up everything and they're going and they're like educated people, right? Like they're university graduates. They've got grad school degrees in some cases, right? Like they're people with accomplishments and careers and so forth who could have, and they leave it all behind and they just spend the rest of their lives chopping vegetables in the kitchen, or, you know, gathering eggs, or, you know, feeding the chickens, whatever it is. Like that's monasticism, this tension between the guys who are in their dirty rags, right, making incense, and then kind of like they have their vestments on because like they're celebrating the liturgy. And it's got a pet peeve of mine that we kind of, in some circles, we kind of like we create this like this false sort of monasticism, and like for me it's a real pet peeve, like especially when it comes to sort of celibate clergy and bishops in the church. Like we have this, like there's this canonical sort of sense that they should be monks before this happens. But it's like we do this kind of like we play games with ourselves, and people will go to a monastery for a weekend or for a night or whatever it is and get tonsured, right? And it's kind of like we do this thing because it's a checkbox amidst like all the orthodox things that we should do, right? And it's like, yes, I'm a tonsured monk in order to like, you know, do the kind of careerist thing and prepare myself to be a bishop or whatever it is. But it's like, you didn't actually live at a monastery. You know, and like for me that is deeply offensive and deeply frustrating, and is kind of this like superficial checkbox kind of orthodoxy thing. Like, yes, all of our bishops are actually like monks at some point, but it's like not really. They were there for a weekend to get like tantra as a pro forma thing, as opposed to these guys who like are spending the rest of their lives in this monastery. And I know monks who, like on Mount Athos, who are not there anymore, because they were sent out by their abbot at some point. Like they were sent out by their abbot to come back into the world and become bishops. Like, and there are actually like bishops and their celibate clergy who are like real monastics, who at some point their abbot is like, look, you've been here for 15, 20 years. The outer church like needs you in some sort of way, go. And there are monks who are, yeah, you've been mooching on this place for too long.
Good job.
But like that is so different than this kind of career path that we have, and this kind of like pietism, or sort of like, look, we are following the dictates of the tradition by kind of doing this checkbox sort of thing. And like, I think it's something for us to be aware of. Like there is the real thing, and then there's kind of the checkbox. And like, this gets to sort of, you know, some of the spirit of repentance that I think this pandemic is like, I think we have to have conversations about that. Like this film is depicting real monastery people who are like, I'm going to be here until I die, or until my abbot sends me into the world, which is so different than I'm going to be here for a night so I can get a little bit of hair chopped off of my head so I can go back to my career path. And like that just, I don't know if I'm being cynical, but that rubs me the wrong way.
Yeah, I get that. That makes a lot of sense to me. And it's funny because like even as you were talking about this, like I realized how much like I buy into the image myself too. Like, because what, and honestly, it just what, and I forgot that to even mention it, but like one of the most shocking moments and this sounds so weird, but one of the most shocking moments in the documentary was in the very beginning to me, when all the monks were painting the fence and they all walked away with white paint all over their like castles.
The robes. Yeah.
Yeah. And like, it was, I was like, almost like, you know, like, oh no, like they're supposed to be all black. Like they can't But I was like, no, wait a minute. Like, I'm scandalized in some sense by this, like, by monks just doing their jobs, like
Yeah.
actually being monks rather than looking like monks. Like,
Mm.
they're actually doing the hard work of being monks and being obedient, and they're out there fixing the fence because they were told to, and like they're covered in paint and they don't care. Like, it doesn't
Yep.
matter to them. It matters to me though, and like that is, it's just these constant, I think, kind of moments of like you're saying, like I need to even I'm realizing in something like that, like while like to what degree then am I fostering just an appearance of something if that's what I'm being scandalized by? Does that
Mm.
make sense? Like all of a sudden I had this moment where I was like, oh crap, like am I like, to what extent is there like this tension in myself even of like appearing a certain way versus actually being a certain way and doing the hard work of being a Christian versus just like looking like one?
Yeah.
Or you know, I don't know if that makes any sense. Like, am I willing to get my robes messed up because I'm
Yeah.
too busy working to
Yeah.
worry about what they look like or whatever?
Yeah. And to what extent our kind of superficial notions actually holding the church back in some sort of way?
Mm-hmm.
Because like I am scandalized by things that don't look orthodox, when actually, like, in a deep way, this is actual Orthodox Christianity.
Yeah.
And like this essay or this video or this podcast or whatever it is, may not look, in kind of a superficial sense like Orthodox, but like it's the
Yeah.
church, in the same way that this monk, right, who was covered and spattered in paint, or like, covered in dust from the chicken coop or whatever it is, like that's what that actually is, as opposed to kind of my superficial whatever clip art version of things.
And I don't know if you remember this moment too, but like there was a one shot, like a monk that was laying in hay, like bottle feeding goats.
Yeah.
And I wasn't sure if that was happening during Pascha. Like it seemed almost like the way that it was filmed was like, meanwhile, while everybody
Yeah.
else is doing the liturgy, right? Here's this monk who's up at night with these little baby goats because they need to eat. And I was like, oh my gosh, like he's missing church. But like, or like that's what I thought, and I'm
Yeah.
like, well,
Yeah.
but maybe the reality is he's just being obedient.
Yeah.
He's just doing what he's told to do, which is the higher good.
Yeah.
And it's just, that is more orthodox than like going to Pascha. And like, I think the same is true probably with a lot of how we approach again, like this pandemic, like being obedient to our bishops and to our priests and to our whatever is far more orthodox than breaking the rules and going to church. And like
Yeah.
standing outside of the doors and like being like, I'm not going to let anyone scare me out of going to church. It's like, well, cool your jets a little bit,
Yeah.
Kind of raising the flag of, religious freedom and all that kind of stuff. Like maybe there's just, and maybe just being Orthodox is just shutting up about it. Just doing what you're told.
Yeah. I think like, one of the questions for us who are not monks, right? Like what does obedience look like in our lives? Because we don't have an abbot to whom to be obedient,
Mm-hmm.
right? But I've heard monks talk about, like, if you're married, there's a certain level of obedience that you have, like, to your spouse, and there are times when your spouse is going to need something of you, right? And like you do it, even if it seems unreasonable or whatever it is, like you sort of do it because that's what your spouse needs in that moment. Like you're tired, but you're going to do this thing. Or if you're a child, like there's a level of obedience to your parents. Or if you're a single person, right? Like you don't have an abbot, you don't have a spouse, but like you can sort of almost, I've heard monks talk about this, like besides like your spiritual father, there's like a certain level of obedience there, but like also sort of like a certain level of obedience just like your friends and other people in your life. Like when people ask something of you, just a readiness to sort of like serve with joy, when limitations are placed upon you, kind of the humble sort of sense of like, I'm going to be obedient to this, even if I don't fully get it. And it's hard.
Yeah. We're all obedient to someone. Like we all need
Yeah.
to be obedient to somebody though. Like for the sake of ridding ourselves of our own hubris, right? It would be detaching from our own self-will.
Yeah.
Because what's
that?
At some point, I think, to talk about though, like obedience versus like almost like this codependence too. Because like even as
Yes.
you were talking about that, I'm like, yeah, but like, is there a limit to that somewhere, right? Like,
Yes.
and because Father Tom Hopko, one of his other things is don't do for anybody what they can and should do for themselves, right?
Yes.
Like, and I wonder about like that kind of stuff, because I do see that in some people, like, well, they're just trying to do all things for all people, and like even that becomes its own kind of hubris of like, look at how helpful I am.
Yes. Yeah,
Everyone
totally.
should be thankful to me.
Such a two.
Yeah, something two and all over the place, just dropping a big old two right in the middle of
right
the room, aren't you? Just left a big old two right in the middle of the room. Enneagram two, we're talking about, by the way. We're talking about Enneagram twos. Just a big old Enneagram, stinky Enneagram two right in the middle of the room, right on the floor.
From the podcast they gave you,
and you're supposed to thank them for it. You're supposed to thank them for it. You're supposed to appreciate it.
Yes.
Thank you for your big two.
It was the biggest ever. The person who talks about this that I think does so in a really helpful way, Elder Emilianos of Simonopatra Monastery, who talks about this. He's like, the purpose of a spiritual father is to raise spiritual adults. And like people will come to me, especially like people out in the world, to be like, Father, what sort of color car should I get? Or, can I have a blessing to buy this house or whatever it is? And he's like, don't come for me for that sort of stuff. Like, I'm not here to sort of like be the person who makes your life decisions, right? Obedience is about, it's about humbling the will. It's not about, like you said, creating this codependence or sort of this unhealthy kind of emotional attachment. Like my goal as your spiritual father is to lead you into spiritual adulthood, not to trap you in some kind of perpetual adolescence.
It's interesting because even what you're saying to me right now is making me think of like what Jesus says to his disciples in John 16. He's like, for now I leave a little bit and you're going to be sorrowful and I'll come back and your joy will be complete. And in that day, you will ask me for nothing. Like, it's a really, like, I remember like when I read that line recently, like, or heard it the last week or whatever, it just struck me as so interesting. Right? Like, you'll ask me for nothing, because it is almost like this moving into like this adulthood, right? Of like, oh, like I just don't, not that I don't have needs, but like they aren't as I'm hungry, I'm tired, it's just this kind of like,
I want to beat your right hand and left hand.
Yeah, because all that really is like as an adult is like knowing there's one thing that you need, right? There's one thing that you need, and like that's the better portion that won't be taken from Mary, right? Yeah. Like the one thing that's needful is the Lord. And I think that that's kind of where, as we become adults, we begin to realize, oh, it's not actually the spiritual consolation, like that monk was saying. It's not actually the feelings that I get from doing this thing. It's the Lord himself that is the one thing that I need. And so when he's taken away, yeah, there's sorrow. And when he comes back, my joy will be complete and I won't need to ask him for anything, because he's all that I need and I'll have him. I'll have him back and no one will take my joy from me. My joy will be made full. Yeah. Like, it was just a really interesting line that, like, I had to like wrestle with a little bit, because it sounds like Jesus is almost like, just like, stop asking me for stuff. Okay. Yeah. Like, just don't, we'll be done. We're going to be done then.
Yeah. And the person, to use Paul's language, right? The person who has grown into the full stature of Christ. Like, when that happens, like, you're not going to need anything because you carry Christ around in your heart. And you're not going to need to sort of shout out, Lord, Lord, like James and John did, like, give me this, give me that, right? Like, you're going to have me. I'm going to be back with you, and that's going to be enough for you, because that's going to be all you want. Yeah, I think that's a beautiful thought.
You're all that I need.
Yeah, you say he's just a friend. You got a friend in Jesus? No, you got a Lord in Jesus.
Son.
Of the Father.
All right. Well,
we're over.
So much for Q&As or top fives, but
it's okay.
Thank God. What a great documentary. Everyone should watch it.
Yeah, it's available on Vimeo. We'll put a link to the website in the description when we post this on YouTube, and when we post it on the podcast feed, it'll go into the description. Watch it. Well worth it. try to develop a little bit of peace in that, a peace like that in your own home church as we continue to find ourselves in one place against our will. And that's it, man. This was good.
True that, yo.
Next week, homework, right? Next week, I think we're doing Clone Wars.
We are doing Clone Wars.
Because Clone Wars, the series will have finished by then, so we will be doing Clone Wars next week.
Woohoo!
Monica goes, yes, homework. Yeah,
All
I
the
gave.
Netflix.
So I don't know if this is helpful. I gave you, Christian, because you haven't seen the whole run. I gave you a list of kind of like, like the top 15 or whatever episodes to watch from these like 7 seasons, just to get a really like sense for the real beats of the story. So I don't know if that's worth, like, maybe I'll tweet it out or something for those who want to
Yeah,
for those
I
who want to
think that
join
could
us
be
next
really
week.
useful.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll do that.
Totally
I'll tweet it out when we're done here. Because 7 seasons is a lot. Yes, there's a lot of episodes. So I'll tweet that out because that's what Christian's going to be watching. I'm probably going to go rewatch some of them as well because it's been a while since I've seen some of the older episodes. And we'll get into the Clone Wars next week. More back
Why
to
is
Star
season
Wars.
4 not on there at all? You skipped all of season 4. Season 4 not good.
No, it's not that season 4 is not good. There's good stuff there, but I realized as I was like putting the list together, I think I actually gave you like 18 episodes, which is, it turns out to like, it's 20 minutes an episode. It turns out to like 5 hours of stuff. I just didn't want to overdo it.
Yeah.
And it was hard choices like about what to include. They're all good. I very much enjoyed. I think it gets much better after season 1. It's just it was hard to pick. It's a lot of seasons.
It is. Another day.
Yeah.
Another time.
Okay.
Well, later.
Next week, Clone Wars.
May the 4th be with you.
And with thy spirit.
Amen.